At Volkswagen Lease Summit, car buying's as easy as 1, 2, 3. All our new cars are priced to lease at $199, $299, or $399 a month. Plus, we have rates as low as 1.9% for 60 months and used cars for every budget. We make car buying easy. Get to VWLeaseSummit.com.
Old Joe Boy just woke up today and decided, you know what, I should probably do something about this whole border crisis, don't you think? I mean, it's about time I do something. Well, normally I would say better late than never, but I'm just not buying it. It's all about election year politics. That's all this is. So this was in all the mainstream news outlets late yesterday that the president today is planning to announce an executive order to partially shut down asylum processing along the U.S.-Mexico border. This could come down as early as today. And basically what they're going to do is ban asylum claims once they surpass 2,500 per day until that number gets down to 1,500 per day. Wow. I mean, you already let, 10, 11, 12 million people across the border. I guess it's time to start getting serious because there's an election coming up 5 months from tomorrow. That's what this is. Anybody who's got 2 ounces of common sense understands. That's what this is. The name of the game here is election year politics. That's all this is about. The president is going to get up there at some point today, or he's going to have his press secretary do it, and he's going to act like he's serious about the border. After he spent the last 3 years not giving 2 rips about it and allowing 10 million people to cross the southern border, having very little idea who most of them or many of them are. And he's going to act like a tough guy. Despite the fact that, the day this guy got in the office, back in January of 2021, Joe Biden took 94 executive actions in his first 100 days in office to dismantle border security. And in fact, I found this clip from the 2020 presidential debate when Joe Biden complained about Donald Trump's stay in Mexico policy. You go back 4+ years ago, and Donald Trump had an executive order on the books that basically said, if you want to claim asylum, a system that was getting abused by many wanting to come to this country. They would come to America, cross the border, and be like, oh, I'm here to claim asylum. And it would be a phony asylum claim. So Donald Trump took the executive order. It was a very smart executive order, and said, you know what, if you want to claim asylum, you can wait in Mexico. And what happened? Amazingly, shockingly, stunningly, asylum claims plummeted. Because many of them were not claiming asylum legitimately. And the other issue is that they didn't want to be in Mexico. Right? Like, Mexico's nice if you're heading down to the resorts in Cancun and Acapulco, although even some of them are pretty risky. But for the most part, they didn't want to be sitting in Mexico. They wanted to be in America. So asylum claims and people coming to try to get across the border plummeted. Well, in 2020, in one of their presidential debates, I stumbled upon this clip last night. Joe Biden talked about how bad of a policy that was.
This is the first president in the history of the United States of America that anybody seeking asylum has to do it in another country. That's never happened before in America. You come to the United States and you make your case that I seek asylum based on the following premise, why I deserve it under American law. They're sitting in squalor on the other side of the river.
No, boy, he was really just chumming it up and trying to really get people to be sympathetic for those who are trying to come to the country illegally. Not that we don't welcome immigrants in America. To be very clear, we do and we should. It's cliche, but we are all products of immigrants in some way, shape, or form. It's what makes this country great. But the policies of immigration of the guy in charge have been unsustainable for years. It's out of control. You've got 10 to 12 million people coming across the last 3+ years, and in large part, we don't know who they are or where they are. So now Joe Biden today is set to potentially, it's either going to be today or tomorrow, announce this plan to ban asylum claims when daily migrant apprehensions surpassed 2,500. In May, this past month, Border Patrol recorded an average of 3,800 migrant apprehensions each day, according to agency data that was obtained by CBS News in this article I'm reading. So they've got to get this thing down to 2,500, and then they would not allow that number to increase at all until they got it down to 1,500 migrants per day at these ports of entry claiming asylum. Now, you might say, well, he's finally doing something. Okay, let me share some numbers with you going back to 2023. In September of 2023, that was the last month of the fiscal year for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. There were 341 encounters in the month of September 2023. This past December of 2023, 371,000. Put that in a perspective for a second here. That is completely out of control, and it's completely unsustainable. And CBS goes on the right here that the numbers are really plummeting here the last, few weeks or so. Wow, congratulations. And part of the reasons it's going down, it always goes down in the summertime. It's kind of hot. I don't know if you knew this, but it's kind of hot in South and Central America this time of year to kind of walk across multiple countries to get into America. So you're better off waiting for, September, October, November, December, when it, cools down a little bit. That's just common sense is what this is. So I'm not buying this thing today. Joe Biden, as I put on X last night, now trying to cap illegal immigrants is like the pathetic pig of a husband trying to save his marriage by telling his wife he will only cheat on her every other month instead of on a monthly basis. The wife shouldn't take it, and America shouldn't take it. And that's where we're at right now as a country. 913-408-7957. Charles and Lee Summit before we hit the break. What's up, Charles? Go ahead, buddy.
Not much. It's just Biden seems to be more like Benedict Biden and his son, the Delaware dirtbag, is on trial. And why doesn't any common sense person realize that if he partially shuts the door, he'll just open it back up again after he's reelected?
Oh, absolutely.
That's
absolutely, Charles and Lee Summit. There's no doubt in my mind this is about one thing and one thing only, and that is appealing to the independent, vulnerable swing voter, whatever you want to call them, ahead of November 5, and make them forget about what the last 3 years have really been about. And that's 10 to 12 million people coming across, unfettered, no idea for where many of them are and what their intentions are. You nailed it, Charles. And the media is going to do its best job to cover it all up for the guy when he makes this big announcement today. They'll make him seem like tough guy Joe, cracking down on the border, the whole thing. And it's a big sham. And you know that, and I know that. So you're spot on there, Charles, no doubt about it. Coming up on KCMO Talk Radio, my phone was blowing up about how Donald Trump keeps doing bonkers numbers on TikTok. He joined it over the weekend, and apparently it's really taken off. I don't have TikTok. Now, I'm a millennial, but TikTok, I got enough social media. You can find me on Facebook and X and follow me on Instagram and do all those things, but I don't have TikTok. But Donald Trump joins TikTok, and I get it. Part of that is outreach to Gen Z and millennials, but mostly Gen Z. So how is it going? What is the strategic plan around it? One of the guys who's working with President Trump on his campaign is named Alex Brusewitz. He is going to join us and explain the importance of that and why it matters coming up next on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM and streaming all morning long on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Who would have thought we'd be living in a world where the WNBA is getting a ton of mainstream attention, publicity, and news, but that's where we find ourselves right now. And to be very clear, it's because of one person and one person only, and that is Caitlin Clark, the star of the Indiana Fever, former star of the Iowa Hawkeyes, who, of course, got to the national title game, became a sensation in college basketball. You know why, by the way? Because she was like the female Steph Curry. I mean, she was draining three-pointers from the logo. That's why Caitlin Clark, in large part, became the sensation. If Caitlin Clark was Rebecca Lobo 2.0, those of you diehard WNBA fans, of which there's 7 of you, are going to remember that name. Mark remembers that name, I know. He's chuckling away in there at my Rebecca Lobo reference. It wouldn't be nearly as attractive. But right now, Steph Curry is, well, he's not the it guy, but his play over the last decade, more or less the it guy, because young people are attracted to that range from three. That's what's in right now in the game of basketball with young people, and Caitlin Clark brought that to the sport as well from a female perspective. So she's the star, big career at Iowa, record numbers for women's college basketball, and now the WNBA is doing better than it's ever done. It's getting talked about at a mainstream level more so than it ever has in its existence for a league that has been subsidized by the NBA since its inception. Well, Caitlin Clark might be the reason that the WNBA actually becomes a profitable venture. And for some reason, her colleagues, her fellow WNBA players, hate her for that. Instead of riding the Caitlin Clark wave and saying to themselves, wow, Caitlin Clark might be the reason we actually start making more money. Caitlin Clark is clearly the reason we are now flying charter instead of commercial. Caitlin Clark is the reason that we may start getting larger endorsement deals. Instead of realizing that and coming to that obvious conclusion, instead they're beating the crap out of her on the court. I mean, you've got example after example of players taking on Caitlin Clark and abusing her. The most egregious example came from this thug Chennedy Carter over the weekend when she just clearly went out of her way to call Caitlin Clark the B word, which whatever, trash talk is a thing in sports, I get that, and then just knock her over along the baseline. And then her teammate, Angel Reese, is like congratulating her as they go to the sideline. And it became that moment because there's been a lot of these kind of things that have happened in recent weeks as Caitlin Clark starts her WNBA career that clearly have been moments to test her. But that one was the most egregious. It went viral over the weekend. And people are finally like, okay, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Caitlin Clark is hated, in part, clearly, because she's the it white chick. And then also, I believe, in part, because of her sexual orientation. She's straight. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And once again, I read you the story yesterday, a Yahoo Sports story from 2017. Candace Wiggins is her name. She was a top pick in the WNBA back in 2008. And she said in part, black woman, who said in part that she left the WNBA earlier than she planned to because she felt as a heterosexual woman, she wasn't really being accepted in the WNBA. She wrote here to Yahoo Sports at the time in this 2017 article, which they never would have written today. It was a conformist type place. There was a whole different set of rules that they could apply. She says, people were deliberately trying to hurt me all the time. I'd never been called the B word so many times in my life. I'd never been thrown to the ground so much. The message was, writes Candace Wiggins, we want you to know we don't like you. She said, so many people think you have to look like a man, play like a man to get respect. I was the opposite. I was proud to be a woman, and it did not fit well in that culture. That is black woman Candace Wiggins to Yahoo Sports back in 2017. And I think Caitlin Clark is undoubtedly dealing with some of that on steroids. So yesterday, Angel Reese, who's one of the other big stars now in the WNBA, she's a rookie, played at LSU, came up through the college ranks, was kind of a rival to Caitlin Clark.
It's kind of like wrestling that just came out of college. We just have our rivalries following into the next league.
Yeah. I mean, you want to call it Larry Bird, Magic Johnson-esque. You could go down that road if you want, I suppose.
Yeah.
Angel Reese talked about this yesterday, this WNBA growth, which has seen a lot of growth. And, gosh, little bit of ego here, shall we say, from Angel Reese in the wake of this controversy with Caitlin Clark. Here we go.
It all started from the national championship game, and I've been dealing with this for 2 years now. And understanding,
Dealing with what? Incredible popularity? Fame? Fortune? I know we live in a world where everybody wants to claim victim status. Even millionaires want to claim victim status, right? Even when it doesn't apply to them. That's the name of the game now. How can you qualify and quantify yourself as a victim? Angel Reese is trying to figure out how to do that here. I've been dealing with this for 2 years. The popularity of the sport that you play has skyrocketed. Ride the wave.
Negative things have probably been said about me, but honestly, I'll take that because look where women's basketball is. People are talking about women's basketball, but you never would think that we'd be talking about women's basketball. People are pulling up to games. We got celebrities coming to games, sold out arenas, just because of one single game. And just looking at that, I'll take that role. I'll take the bad guy role, and I'll continue to take that on and be that for my teammates. And if I want to be that, and I know I'll go down in history, I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too, and I want y'all to realize that.
Oh, yeah. No, it's not. It's not because of you. And I've got the numbers to back it up. So Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese have each played, give or take, 10 to 12 games in their respective careers in the WNBA. They're both rookies. And I broke down the attendance numbers for Chicago Sky games, which is the team that Angel Reese plays for. And then I broke down the attendance numbers for Indiana Fever games, the team that Caitlin Clark plays for. And I removed the game when Angel Reese played against Caitlin Clark, because that's really a Caitlin Clark game. So Angel Reese saying that I'm a star too, look at me. The average attendance for Chicago Sky games, removing the game against Caitlin Clark, is about 8,200. People who went to Chicago Sky games, not including the one against Caitlin Clark. In Caitlin Clark games, the Indiana Fever are averaging nearly 16,000 people in attendance at their games. That's not even close. That is about double the amount of people who are going to Caitlin Clark games versus the people who are going to Angel Reese games. It is a one-person show in the WNBA, and that show is Caitlin Clark. And that is one of the reasons that she is despised by many of the people in the WNBA. But unfortunately for them, they are so short-sighted, they cannot see the forest through the trees and realize that this one-person show can very much help them make more money on the court, make more money from endorsements, and allow them to start doing things like flying private. But they don't realize that, John.
Yeah, it kind of happens when you bust up the old boys club, right?
Yeah.
The business model is changing now. They don't like it. They're trying to assert some territory, but it's going to be a whole different thing there, and you're going to be left behind as a dinosaur if you're going to be one of the, one of the brutes, I guess, in WNBA.
They're all going to make more money.
Well, sure, they don't realize that. It's that whole thing, with a band and the people that bought the first album and that EP, they love it, and all you other people who came on the second album are posers. It's a whole mentality,
Well,
not just with music and sports, but it's just that old boys club thing, like we were here first.
Well, I don't care who was where first.
Oh, exactly.
I don't think anybody should care, especially if I'm set to benefit from the success of Caitlin Clark. If I'm sitting there on the bench of a WNBA team, I'm looking at this and I'm like, hey, this is quite a deal. I get to sit here and potentially start making more money because of one person. I'm going to ride that wave. You mean we've now got, and there are multiple Caitlin Clark games where 17,000 people are attending. That's like an NBA game, 17,000 people in attendance. Versus Angel Reese games that, as I look at the attendance numbers, 7,800, 7,900, 6,200, 6,200, 9,000 here. Caitlin Clark's doing 15, 16, 17,000 everywhere she goes. It is a one-man show in the WNBA, or one-woman show in the WNBA. And that's okay. 913-408-7957. That is the text line and the studio line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Pete, this is all about race. That is on the text line. I don't think it's all about race, but I certainly think the racial element undoubtedly is playing a factor here in all this. And you'd have to be naive to think otherwise. 913-408-7957. Good to be here on a Tuesday morning. We are a half hour away from your next chance to win 3 packs of tickets to Country Stampede coming up later this month at Azura Amphitheater. We've got 3-day passes all week long at 7:15 in our show and at 10:15 in the Ray Stevens show. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I can't believe I am just coming across this. Well, it just actually came down here in the last hour and a half or so. It's not even 7 o'clock. This dropped at 5:07 this morning. And it's a guest commentary in the Kansas City Star, written by Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas, Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves, and Jackson County Prosecutor Gene Peters Baker.
Sounds like a Florida Georgia line song. It took a lot of people to write that.
Yeah. Did they each get one sentence?
I'm curious.
Did Lucas get 2 paragraphs
Maybe
for
it's
everyone?
like that book reading. Yeah, they each read a page.
Oh, man.
Curious.
This is ridiculous. Headline, Save Casey's Offer. Put down the guns and leave crime behind, and we'll help you succeed. Oh, my goodness. How exhausting is this? Yeah, because, the criminals this morning are firing up their cup of joe, opening up their Kansas City Star.
I'm following you.
And say, you know what? I never thought about this.
Yeah.
I never thought about this whole idea of leaving a life of crime behind.
The guy's got his slippers and robe on. Crosses his legs, to pay for.
Yeah. Little morning cigar if he's filling up for it.
Let's see here. Ooh.
Oh, Mr. Lucas, thank you for this guest commentary.
Food for thought.
Yeah. Oh,
take
brother.
the day off.
Yeah.
Mull this over.
Oh, man. Oh, gosh, that's hilarious. Now, oh, okay. Anyway, let's continue here. Oh, now I'm thinking about, what's the movie? The Frank Lucas movie. American Gangster. Denzel Washington, where the drug kingpin is actually living a white-collar life, the whole thing. Now, that's not happening, of course, with these thugs and gangbangers on the streets of Kansas City.
Gus's Fried Chicken. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A little Breaking Bad reference there, John. Well done. All right, here's the commentary from these 3. This article, guest commentary in the Kansas City Star, which is just being read by woke white people in Northeast Johnson County. This week, for the first time in half a decade, we, the city, law enforcement, and the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office and community service providers sat at the table. The old sat down at the table reference. Had to drop one of those. The table. With those driving Kansas City's crime, giving them an ultimatum. Put down the guns and leave behind crime, and we will help you obtain the resources to get your life back on track to succeed. Or you will face the full consequences of the law. Oh, that's a good one. With swift and certain consequences. Stop right there. You know how I know this thing is complete and utter BS? Because those in charge of prosecution in this town, Gene, are not interested in pursuing full consequences of the law. They are not interested in swift and certain consequences. That's why crime is out of control in this community. Because the criminals know that the people in charge of prosecuting them actually don't intend to do that. You think Gene Peters Baker just woke up this week and was like, you know what I should do? I should actually try to put hardened criminals behind bars and actually, pursue bad people with swift and certain consequences instead of slapping them on the wrist, giving every excuse in the book about Missouri gun laws and we don't have jail space and all this other nonsense and our cops are bad. I mean, this is just, everything about this is utter nonsense. And it's disappointing to me, but it's also unfortunately where we're at, that the mayor and the police chief want anything to do with this prosecutor who's a lame duck. The biggest, a lot of people have ragged on the mayor for saying the crime's out of control. And there's no doubt he deserves some blame just as the mayor. But I also will readily admit there's only so much he can do. The biggest thing that Mayor Lucas could do is use his bully pulpit of the mayor's office to call out the incompetency of the prosecutor's office. It's never going to happen. I've been asking for that for years. It's never going to happen. But that's the biggest thing that the mayor could actually do when it comes to violent crime. Like, he can't go arrest people. He's not a prosecutor. He can fully fund the police, which thank goodness, they are now doing in Kansas City. But his bully pulpit is very valuable. And I wish he would use that more frequently, because that would be a great tool to use to call out those that need to be called out. But unfortunately, there's been this, I'll rub your back, you rub my back relationship with Gene, and it's done nothing but get more people killed in this town on a yearly basis. So now they write this guest commentary, and it's like, hey, our message is, they write here, we want to see each one of you leave behind crime and go on to live a successful life with your families, friends, community, and everyone you love. We are here to help you, but if you won't let us, we will stop you. The choice is yours alone. Oh, I'm sure they're shivering in their boots there across Kansas City at the idea of Gene Peters Baker coming after them. Not. It's one of the reasons that crime is out of control. They don't fear consequences. And you know what? You know what's going to get it done? Putting your money where your mouth is. Guest commentaries in the Kansas City Star aren't going to do a damn thing. Put your money where your mouth is. Stop writing, pretty words in a newspaper that 7 people read. Do what needs to be done and go after bad guys, and then come back and talk to us. In the meantime, I'll just laugh at the guest commentary, because that's all it's worth. We've got the Country Stampede 3-day passes coming up in 15 minutes here on KCMO Talk Radio. So I wanted to address this because, of course, for the Kansas City Star, the biggest thing they care about in Kansas City police world is not the number of homicides, but removing the current system that is in place with a board of police commissioners to give the uber-goober city council full control of this police department, which if that had been the case the last few years, they would have defunded the police in 2020 and or 2021. They tried to get around it to do it anyway. Thankfully, we have the current system we have with a state-appointed board of police commissioners, and that was not allowed to happen. And now, of course, they're properly funding the police department because, amazingly, the people in charge across the country realized that having less police leads to more crime. I know it's stunning.
Talk about a bombshell.
But that's what this all led to. But it doesn't change the fact that for the Kansas City Star, their main motivation is to get local political control of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department. It's never going to happen, but doesn't stop them from trying and writing about it every chance they can get. So they wrote about this in an editorial here in the last couple of days, and the headline was, "Millions in police settlements come from KC taxpayers' pockets. KCPD needs real reform." And they talk about how the Kansas City Police Department paid out nearly $7 million in settlements from February of 23 to February of 24. $7 million. Now, these cases go back to 2018. They just paid them out over the last, year or so. And $5 million came from one case involving Terrence Bridges, a man who police shot and killed back in May of 2019 after officers responded to a reported carjacking. But that all leads to the Kansas City Star's latest piece about how KCPD is dysfunctional and the system doesn't work. And if only the city council oversaw the police department, stuff like this wouldn't happen, or something along those lines. That's more or less the moral of everything they write about when it comes to KCPD. But here's what's amazing. You go to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, and I don't know if you saw this, but there was a $10 million verdict to a woman who was injured and the family of a man killed by a Jackson County deputy. This was written, ironically enough, in the Kansas City Star on May 31st. Randy McGaw was awarded $3 million by a jury on May 24th last week after a Jackson County deputy shot her back in 2019. Another $7 million was awarded to the two sons of 29-year-old Alan Cates, who the deputy shot and killed in the same incident. So this has not gotten nearly as much attention for a multitude of reasons. It's not KCPD, the color of the people involved. You know where that leads. So it just naturally is not going to get nearly as much attention as KCPD shoots minority. Like, those are just the facts. That's how the media covers these local stories. That's what they want to cover. They want to pursue certain narratives, all those things that are indisputable facts. But you have Jackson County, who has settled now a $10 million case in one incident. Yet I don't see any editorials from the Kansas City Star talking about how the Jackson County Sheriff's Office needs real reform in the wake of a single $10 million settlement. I don't see any editorials about how the Jackson County taxpayer is having to fund this $10 million settlement, and maybe that needs and means we need changes when it comes to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office. Ask yourself why. Because it's all about enemy number one at the Kansas City Star, and that is KCPD. And that is trying to change the way business is done, even though the way business is done with this police department is not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative. But they will continue to pursue their narrative as best they can. Facts be damned. Even when there's another story right here in our backyard that would justify some editorial, but they chose not to write that one. And you can ask yourself why. And I got to imagine the happy dance is being done at the Trump HQ because another billionaire announcing yesterday that he is going to be backing Donald Trump for president after rebuking him just 3 short years ago. Billionaire venture capitalist Doug Leone announcing yesterday that he is supporting Donald Trump for president in a statement put out at 3:30 yesterday. Quote, "I have become increasingly concerned about the general direction of our country. The state of our broken immigration system, the ballooning deficit, the foreign policy missteps, among other issues." Basically everything. What's left on the list at that point? Therefore, I am supporting former President Donald Trump in this coming election. Okay, now, this is a big deal because the issue that Donald Trump was perceived to have had in the last couple of years was that even if he got to this point as the GOP frontrunner, the big money was not going to be there. It's great to have all the small-time donors. It's great to have a tremendous grassroots support system. You need that. But unfortunately, in today's political climate, you got to have the big donors as well. Now, Trump overcame that in 2016. All the big money was behind Hillary. In 2020, Wall Street overwhelmingly favored Joe Biden. So did, obviously, big tech in Silicon Valley. Well, many of them prominently are now reversing course. And just like this guy, Doug Leone, they're looking at it and they're like, okay, direction of the country, broken immigration system, disaster. Deficit is a mess. Not that Trump was good on it, but, Joe's been awful. Foreign policy, complete and utter joke, among other issues. So they're looking at this, like many Americans, through the lens that it needs to be looked at through. A binary choice. You got 2 options. One of these guys is going to be in the Oval Office. It's not about whether or not you support everything Donald Trump believes. You love the way he's lived his life. None of that matters. You have a binary choice here. Joe Biden or Donald Trump. One or the other is going to be in the White House. And you have to pick. Now, maybe it helps you sleep at night leaving that presidential selection empty, or selecting RFK, or, writing in your great Aunt Susie or something like that. But the reality is one of those 2 guys is going to be in the White House. So you're left with 2 options. And now you have prominent Silicon Valley hedge fund folks who are like, okay, fine. Trump's the better option. Maybe not the perfect one, but clearly the better one. And this dovetails into something Charlie Gasparino was talking about yesterday on the show. Charlie's with the Fox Business Network, and he wrote a big piece over the weekend that talked about how big money donors, Wall Street and Silicon Valley, which overwhelmingly favored Joe Biden back in 2020, are now coming to Donald Trump.
You're seeing Mark Andreessen, you're seeing a lot of others saying, whoa, what Biden is doing is enough. And the Israeli issue, I think, the fact that he came out so lame on campus, anti-Semitism, I think, is really kind of that threw a monkey wrench into his fundraising, and as applies to a lot of people in corporate America. A lot of them are Jews. They're like, what is going on here? So I think Trump's not going to have a problem with money. Ironically, the Alvin Bragg verdict was probably the best fundraising advertisement he's ever going to get. I mean, the money is pouring in.
And it is pouring in. And that leads to the Trump campaign announcing yesterday it raised $141 million in May alongside the Republican National Committee, a staggering total. A large part of that obviously came after Donald Trump was found guilty on 34 felony counts in New York on Thursday. They got $51 million in the 24 hours after that conviction came down. And on top of that, about 30% of those donations in the month of May were from first-time donors. Like, think about it. Donald Trump has basically been in the political space for 3 election cycles in a row. 2016, ran for re-election in 2020. Now here he is in 2024. So you have had effectively 8 years to donate to Donald Trump in some capacity if you were so wanting to do so. And in the last few days, 30% of those donations were from first-time donors who had never given a dime to this guy and his causes. Alvin Bragg is the greatest fundraiser in Donald Trump's political career. And that's why the guy was more than happy to go on Fox and Friends over the weekend and say what is absolutely true. This continues to be good for him, and if it means he's got to spend a little bit of time in jail, so be it.
The judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail.
It could.
What that could.
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything.
You don't beg.
The way it is.
You don't beg. You don't beg for anything. In fact, it's working in reverse. The more they attack him, the more money he is raising for this 2024 election cycle. And there's a lot of people looking at it from afar and saying, I don't even like this guy, but suddenly I have a bit of sympathy for him. How many millions of Americans are out there right now being like, you don't have to like him. You don't have to look at this guy and be like, gosh, he really fires me up. You don't have to own a MAGA hat or anything like that to realize this is clearly political prosecution. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it's political prosecution. You would have to be naive to think otherwise. And it makes Donald Trump a sympathetic figure, which is very difficult to do, almost impossible to do. But Alvin Bragg has figured out a way to make it happen, which is just stunning, and I didn't think I'd ever see it. 913-408-7957. That's the studio line that is also the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM as we roll till 8 o'clock here. I guess I'll spend a minute on this before I get to the post office since the text line exploded on me, and that's fine. Whoever needs to hear it, like Joe Biden's really bad. He's a bad president. He's done a poor job in the economy. He's done a poor job on foreign policy. He's done a poor job on most things, the border. Guys, he's not Hitler. Sorry. He's not the guy who exterminated 6 million Jews. I hate to break it to you. It's that kind of rhetoric that is going to end up ending this guy back in the White House at 85 years old for 4 more years. You want to play that game? You're going to win stupid prizes. Let's not be dumb. Let's use our head. I know some don't like to do that. I know it's very emotional, but that's not a very controversial statement. But here we are. It's 2024, and we're getting towards the dumb election season.
And yet we hear the left throw that comparison around with other Republican candidates. So
Donald Trump, right?
This hubbub, and I'm like, please.
I know.
Right. In general, I mean, there are other things to be upset about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
No, some people listen.
Yeah.
And I hate to say it, but it's true on both sides of the political aisle.
Absolutely.
People just want to be upset for the sake of being upset. They want to be offended for the sake of being offended, and they want to find every little thing they can to be offended by. And it's like, no, we can stick in reality, stick in the factual world, and realize that, by the way, no one's going to be swayed by that.
Yeah.
Joe Biden's Adolf Hitler, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you know what? That convinced me.
Linda Ronstadt threw that around at Bush.
Yeah.
Different stuff.
Donald Trump's a fascist, man.
Yeah.
You're doing the same thing. You sound just as stupid when you say stuff like that. And if that offends you, you're being a snowflake. Grow up, get over it. Okay? Sorry, snowflake. Sorry. Oh, is that getting you more upset when I call you a snowflake for being a snowflake? Okay. All right. We'll move on then on KCMO 850.
We just finished up Tirade Tuesday, but nobody's mentioned. I could have won on one. I guess this mail thing is pissing me off.
The mail thing is getting under your skin there, John?
Well, and it's just eBay. My prescriptions come on time, but people aren't getting their prescriptions.
And they're not getting their paychecks.
Some
of them.
Go.
Yeah. So some people do it the old school way.
I'm just pissed because I'm not getting something from eBay, and I could see it set in Kansas City, Missouri for a week. I don't know why.
That's crazy.
And there's never an explanation. It suddenly appears the minute you open up a complaint.
Exactly right.
How about that?
Hey, there it is. It showed up. So the Postal Service has announced an audit on mail services in the Kansas City metro after continued reports of significant delivery delays.
They'll be mailing out surveys soon.
Oh, we should have this all fixed up by 2027. The audit will evaluate the efficiency of delivery options and property conditions at the processing and distributing centers. The locations that will be reviewed by the USPS Office of Inspector General in the Kansas City area include Hickman Mills Post Office, Robert L. Roberts Post Office. Okay, we got to get a new name. The Robert L. Roberts Post Office.
Yeah, I wondered if that was one of those kind of joking ones, right?
I don't know who Robert Roberts is, but come on, you got to change the name first and foremost.
John.
Yeah. The Shawnee Mission Post Office over in Mission's also getting an audit. So the audit, according to Roger Marshall, Kansas U.S. Senator, is the first step in getting much-needed answers for the Kansas City area communities who deserve reliable mail services. Have you walked into a post office lately? I have, unfortunately. And it's a horrible experience. You thought the DMV was bad. Walk into a post office. At least the DMV you only have to go to like once a decade, maybe. If you got to go more than, that's too bad. But for most of us, I've been in the DMV here once. It's when I got to town and that was it. And if you can avoid going to a DMV, you're better off as a human being. That's the post office. Unfortunately, many of us frequent the post office a little more frequently than once every decade. I mean, I walk into my post office and the line is 10 deep. You got one person taking customers. You got 4 people in the back. No one knows what they're doing. Maybe a second person comes out to help the person out the front. But my goodness, sorry to bother you by trying to give you money for your services. But this is what you get in large part with bureaucrats. Nobody wants to be there. Nobody's happy to be there. You're working for them as the customer, okay? Don't step on their toes. Don't piss them off. Don't ask for 11 stamps. Keep it to 10, and everyone's going to get out of there okay. But if not, woo! I mean, there is no worse experience than going to the post office. I'll take the dentist every Tuesday over having to go to the post office 10 out of 10 times. It's not even close. I got a pretty good dentist, too. That helps. But it's a joke how bad the post office is. I got a cousin who's getting married here in a couple of months. I didn't even know about it. But I got like 20-some-odd cousins, and I never thought this guy would get married. So he's getting married, and he had to send out an email to the family. There's dozens of people. And he said, hey, just in case you didn't get the invite in the mail. That's where we're at now, where people send follow-up emails about their mail because no one knows if they're getting their mail anymore. That's how bad the post office has become. And it's allowed operations, like FedEx and UPS to thrive because of the incompetency of the post office. But the whole premise of the post office was, hey, you can put this letter in the mail for, what's it up to now? 60 some odd cents for a letter. It's pretty. It's gone up the last bunch of years. And you can send somebody a letter in the mail, and this is great, and it's 60 some odd cents. Well, now I don't know if it's getting there. 2, the price has gone up tremendously the last few years. And 3, anytime I experience the post office, it's the worst experience in the country.
We've gone a long way from neither rain nor snow nor dark of night, that you were going to get your mail come hell or high water. And the creek don't rise, of course. But
yes.
We're a long way from that. That's very symbolic of America.
Now, let me say one thing, though. Let me back the post office on this.
All right.
I saw that dog attacks on postal employees in Kansas and Missouri have gone up the last couple of years. And Mark can speak to this as a guy who used to drive for Amazon. If you don't have your big old dog in a place where they can't get after the postman or postwoman, then shame on you. You don't deserve your mail. All right? If you've got some massive husky or Doberman out roaming the front yard and then being like, where's my mail? My mail's not showing
Some
up.
pretty fierce chihuahuas.
Yeah, well, that's true, too. But at least those you can kick around a little bit. At least I would if I was the postman. Then you know what? You don't deserve your mail. Or just hand the mail to the Doberman and see what he does with your mail when he tears that whole thing up and that paycheck up and see how much you like it. But I will be sympathetic to the post office employees because the dog attacks are on the rise because people are not protecting postal workers and delivery drivers from their dogs. That's happening en masse.
You get some pretty hacked off canines when the Chewy delivery doesn't show up.
Ain't that the truth?
At Volkswagen Lease Summit, car buying's as easy as 1, 2, 3. All our new cars are priced to lease at $199, $299, or $399 a month. Plus, we have rates as low as 1.9% for 60 months and used cars for every budget. We make car buying easy. Get to VWLeaseSummit.com.